All right, you guys, welcome to my channel. If you're new, do hit that subscribe button as well as the bell. So anytime any new content is uploaded, you will be the first to find out. But without further ado, you guys, let's just dig into this video. Okay, you guys, so we are going to get into a clip of Judge Joe Brown. The clip is not that long, but more recently, Judge Joe Brown has been in the news probably for all the wrong reasons. He said a lot of stuff, I shouldn't say wrong reasons. Judge Joe Brown, since his retirement, has been extremely vocal, definitely a no holds barred on his opinions about certain things. Was he messy talking about Kamala and a lot of that stuff? Definitely almost, well, if you guys check out the other parts, I do call it Messy Brown. But in this clip, we're just going to check it out. And again, like I said, these are the opinions of Judge Joe Brown. Throughout the reaction video, I'm going to give my own opinion. And then at the end, I'm going to recap and just basically tell you guys, you know, my personal thoughts on the subjects that he's bringing up. But let's check out this video. Okay, you guys, so Judge Joe Brown, he's being asked about what he thinks about rappers painting their nails. I would say maybe within the last 5-6 years, it has really, especially recently, there's a lot of rappers that do it. So this is just Judge Joe Brown. Let's get into what Judge Joe Brown had to say.
Are trying to be street cred. They got too many people just got out the joint used to doing the 6B thing. What's 6Bs? Unbelt, drop britches, drop boxes, bend over, spread butt cheeks, get boy banged. And too many of them into that sissy thing. That's not manly. And see, we have to get away from that and get back to manhood. Wherever you have men, anywhere on the planet Earth, anywhere in human history.
I'm gonna let this video play, you guys, but clearly these are just the opinions of Judge Joe Brown. He's been very vocal, as we know, probably more vocal since he has retired, but he has a lot to say. With the whole nail painting thing, you know, I don't know if he's really the one, or anybody's really the one to decide what's manly, what is and what isn't. But I will say this, I personally do think that it's kind of like an agenda, industry agenda, to kind of have young men painting their nails, wearing barrettes in their hair and all that kind of stuff. But I don't think that necessarily has anything to do with what he just said, the 6Bs and what's manly and what isn't and all that. So I don't know, but let's just keep going.
What you wind up with is men attempting to impose order where they live. Now, if you take the black community, do you see men attempting to impose order where they live? All right. Do you even see men in charge? Okay, there is the problem. And you see, it's not even a black-white thing. It's a universal thing in this country where you're forgetting what leadership is. If you want to see leadership, take a visit to your local zoo, go to the primate areas and watch the baboons and the chimps. And you can see politics. You can see them off behind bushes. They're cutting deals with each other. They come to blows, they bite each other, they pound each other to see who's going to be the alpha male, who's going to be in charge. And interestingly enough, what they're fighting about is where they are supposed to be living. The alpha male is closest to the leopard that wants to eat one of the rest of them. So you're fighting for being the privilege, of being the first to die, which is interesting. And we forget that because now we have administrators who couldn't get 2 people to follow them to go get an ice cream cone, or have diarrhea and couldn't get them to follow them to a porta potty with a lot of toilet paper. And well, anyway, that's the way we are right now. See, we forget about these things. Like, honestly, would you follow a Lori Lightfoot into danger? Would you follow a Fannie Willis into danger? Would you follow a Maxine Waters into danger, or for that matter, would you follow that sissy type Cory Booker into danger? Would you follow an Al Sharpton into danger? You know, he looks like he wants to tremble so he can hold somebody's hand and sing, "We shall overcome."
What is the biggest difference between present?
Before they get into the next portion of that, you guys, and then I'm also going to share my thoughts after this video plays. It's a very short clip, but I would actually have to disagree with Judge Joe Brown when it comes to about the newer generation. If anything, I think it's actually kind of the opposite. I think that the newer generation, maybe for different reasons, maybe it's media, maybe it's video games, whatever, but the newer generation, I would say, is way more fearless than past generations. 'Cause I think 2020 was a testament to that. That was not people from Judge Joe Brown's generation that did a lot of stuff. Like, that was the envelope or the threshold, I guess you could say, was kind of, the boundaries were stepped over. In the past, people get mad about, you know, whatever it was, unjust things that happen in the streets. A lot of times in the past, people would riot their own neighborhoods and tear up their own neighborhoods. The newer generation really kind of hit a lot of corporate pockets and took it to, you know, downtowns. They took it to, you know, places that had never actually ever been stepped over in their request for like change. So I would say I would definitely have to disagree with him on that. And if past generations were that like fearless, I don't think we would still have certain issues that we still have now, right? But I think it's a gradual progression. So I do have to disagree with him on, you know, all of that. And, you know, I don't know if he's talking about leadership, saying because they're women, they wouldn't, you know, couldn't lead, or if he's saying that, I don't know, too passive. I have no idea. But let's just keep going.
Men and the black men from your generation.
We had principle and cause. We had a purpose. It is right now, today, we can do something about this oppression that we have suffered as a people. We are willing to die for it. We would go out on patrols in the black communities across the nation and keep order in those communities, whether it was your own people or it was the police coming in as an occupation army. It's not what's going on now.
Do you think it's because this generation is so selfish?
Well, they have gotten propagandized so hard that they don't understand what manhood is. See, manhood is about duty, honor, obligation, accountability. You have a cause and a purpose. You can articulate that. Ask one of the young brothers what he's all about, and he'll give you something that's nihilistic, hopelessness, not a cause, not a purpose. You see, if you've got something that's on your ass, that's adversity. And when you conquer adversity, yeah, I did it. And you brag about it. So what is it that we brag about now that we have? What did we conquer? You know, you're in Africa, 13 years old. You got to prove your worth training up to manhood. From that point, go kill your lion with your wooden spear without even an iron head on it. And the elders go to see if you got a real lion. What do we do now? Punk out. Tear up where we live. We look at a spectacle where the women are the females are totally out of control. You see all of the videos. Somebody's camera, you know, trying to video some clown females playing girl-rilla as they're battling it out, flailing all over the place, knocking each other around. That is a disgrace.
Okay, as you guys can hear, that was a shot at Glorilla and I guess music, you know, black women in the music industry. Now, I will say this. I get it. I do believe, although I think it's more of like, my own personal beliefs is that it's more of kind of like an agenda thing. set up by higher ups, because media is so incredibly powerful. But yes, I do think, I don't know, it's kind of twofold. I feel like when you are really young or whatever, if you're going to dye your hair 2 different colors, whatever, just be ratchet, that's kind of the age to do that at. Just think back, whatever, past generations, maybe how you dressed or certain things that you did when you were a teen or even like early 20s might be very different than what you do a decade later, 2 decades, you know what I mean? Like, so a certain amount of ratchetness, I think, is to be expected, with like young artists. However, I do think a lot of the maybe whatever overly sexualized way of dressing, I've heard some people say, dress like strippers, curse like sailors. I get it, especially since media is incredibly powerful. It does have an influence on the coming generations, maybe not, people in their 30s, 40s up, but for younger generations, certain types of music, whatever, it can have a big, huge impact, right? Media is very powerful. So I get what he's saying in that sense. But let's keep going.
Those girls ought to be practicing being women and ladies to bestow order in people's heads. They have sons, and those sons are looking at disorder, chaos. What do you expect them to be when they grow up? There are no father figures around to model themselves on. There is no media, no voice of the village trying to push masculinity, which is about duty, honor, obligation, accountability, public order. You see, we don't have these things. We've got chaos.
Okay, you guys, so I kind of wanted to not even recap, but just to kind of give my opinion. I talked a little bit throughout the reaction video, but I wanted to just kind of give my overall opinion. I think that Judge Joe Brown, I think he had a few points here and there, but there was, some things that I definitely did disagree with. And I want to kind of break it up into 2 portions, right? One portion is going to be industry agenda, and the other portion is just going to be my own like separate thoughts on it. Now, Judge Joe Brown, he didn't really have too many positive things to say about the newer generation. My own personal thoughts on that is that I, in a lot of ways, and I've, in my own private circles, talk to people, like I'm actually am proud of the newer generation in a lot of different ways that I'm proud. Now this is the separate, right? We're going to talk about industry agenda stuff on one end, and then we're going to talk about, just like I say, my thoughts. But one thing, like I say, I'm going to give probably about 3 good reasons why I'm actually proud of the newer generation. One is that I do think that they are fearless. Judge Joe Brown said that they're not fearless like previous generations and things like that. I actually disagree. Now, I don't know if it's because of media. I don't know if it's because of video games. I don't know what. But I do know that the newer generation, in my opinion, seem to be way more daring than previous generations. I don't know if they think if something happens to them, they're going to respawn like a video game. I have no idea. But the newer generation is way more daring and fearless, in my opinion, than previous generations. And I think that the pandemic was a good example of that. Like previously, right, with the whole George Floyd thing, previously when, something like that happens, people take to the street, they protest, they're upset. Maybe they might riot and tear up their own neighborhoods. But this newer generation, took to the downtown streets, hit the corporate pockets where it hurts, and they were way more like stuff that just was never thought of prior to. So in that way, I do think I would have to disagree. And I do think as well, I'm not saying that there wasn't a Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, a civil rights movement and things like that at all, where, it took a lot of courage for those individuals. And there were a lot of people that were hosed down and things like that. So I'm not at all taking away saying that that generation wasn't courageous, but I'm saying like certain things that were attempted, I would say more recently with the newer generation, was not attempted back then. So in that case, I wouldn't say that the newer generation lacks the courage or the, you know, whatever, the balls, if you will, to make moves, okay? So that's that. That's one reason why I'm, you know, I would say proud of the new generation, because they are pretty fearless. Pluses and minuses to it, but the newer generation is definitely way more fearless. The second thing I'm proud of the newer generation is that they seem to be way more tolerant and accepting of each other, right? The newer generation is real quick to say, no, you don't body shame someone. No, you don't, whatever. Where the rappers, right, painting their nails and things like that. You know, back in the day, somebody would be real quick to laugh somebody down the street or point them out and yell out a slur or beat them up or something like that. The newer generation, in my opinion, seems to be way more accepting and tolerant toward each other, which I do think is a positive, okay? I do think it's a positive. The third thing I would say is that, well, we'll just keep it. I don't want to make this video too long. I'm gonna keep it at those two main points. But in the fearlessness and the openness and the acceptance of each other, them standing up for each other in a lot of different ways, I think is to be applauded, right? Now, I'm gonna take it separate to the industry sort of thing, right? Because Judge Joe Brown, he did talk about rappers painting their nails. Now, like I say, industry-wise, yes, I do think that there is an agenda with that. I do feel like, you know, it's agenda, try to say that 5 times fast. There is an agenda to have rappers, you know, people that typically would be very like, you know, I don't know, machismo or, you know, real masculine or whatever, to have them painting their nails, wearing barrettes in their hair, carrying purses and things like that. Yeah, I do feel like there is an agenda to really kind of push that. I do feel like, you know, whatever, even with, you know, women being overly sexualized, you know, I've heard people say, like I say, dress like strippers, cursing like sailors. Yes, I do think that is a industry agenda. That's separate. I do feel like the industry, my own personal opinion, is ran by a bunch of Luciferian Satanists. And I know that's a heavy hit to say, but I do feel like in a lot of ways, yes, it is ran by that. So to put out a lot of confusion and chaos really should not, or over sexualizing people and you know, a certain agenda should not surprise anybody. That's one. But like I say, through it, just like how I feel like anytime somebody might have bad intentions or negative intentions, they're gonna mess some stuff up, there are positive things that come from it. And the positive things that I feel like have come from that is a certain amount of acceptance, tolerance. The newer generation, they are not real quick to shame each other. They're way more accepting and more loving toward each other and less judgmental, I would say, than previous generations. For, you know, women that maybe are more in their masculine, where they're, you know, whatever, cussing like sailors and whatever, maybe it's a certain freedom that comes with that in previous, right, where women, we have to act in whatever, a certain way. However, yes, I do think that a lot of that is meant to just put out a certain amount of confusion, just like them taking off gender off of birth certificates and all that kind of stuff. That's just my own personal opinion. Like I say, Judge Joe Brown, he might have had a few points, but there was a lot that I wouldn't totally, completely agree with him on at all. And even the whole like masculinity. I will say this, because the newer generation probably is way more open with each other, that does not mean that the newer generation is any different than the older generation. I think the older generation was the same, only a lot of things that instead of it being done openly and publicly was done behind doors, closed doors, okay? Hence the ditties and all that stuff, which is definitely older, past generations, okay? Whereas the newer generation is more open with their stuff. But do I think that them being open with their stuff is being influenced on purpose by the industry, you know, for a certain agenda? Yes, I do think that. But yeah, you guys leave comments down below. Let me know what you guys think. And I had to cover Judge Joe Brown because how could you not? I almost called him Messy Brown because he's giving his opinion, but he's definitely no holds barred. So I don't know. You guys leave comments. I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.